Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. In this little video that I've got going on today, uh, there is a very consistent signal going on that is going to cause severe weather in obviously the central United States, as you can see here, in the northern United States, also in Canada, in the Great Lakes region, and potentially even the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast as well. Um, so. That's going on. So anyways, let's get into it. So today is June 8th, 2026. Right now it is 2:48 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 1:48 Central, 12:48 Mountain, and 11:48 a.m. Pacific. So nice, nice about that. So anyways, as you can see, if you take a look at the risk level, you could screenshot this. I'm always going to reference the risk level. In case y'all forget, because sometimes I don't post videos for a while because there may not be, that pertinent of severe weather. So you can always screenshot this, post it on your wall or something, just to, remind yourself of the Storm Prediction Center risk levels. Uh, but yeah, so we have two enhanced risks of severe weather today. We have one stretching from kind of like Kansas City almost, basically like the Kansas City limits, and then all the way up through eastern and northern and central Kansas into portions of extreme southern Nebraska. And then we also have another segregated, what do you call it, enhanced risk in Colorado, in eastern, northeastern Colorado. All right. The enhanced risk is the orange regions. The yellow region is the uh, slight risk of severe weather, extending from, western Missouri through Kansas and Nebraska, going into southeastern Wyoming and northeastern and eastern Colorado. And then the marginal risk, there's actually two marginal risks, but one marginal risk is in uh, eastern Missouri, southern Illinois, southwestern Indiana, western Kentucky, and northwestern Tennessee. And then another marginal risk that is associated with this whole severe weather system is spanning from Minnesota all the way down through the plains into parts of the western part of the Midwest, into the kind of Rockies a little bit, into the Oklahoma and Texas panhandles. Uh, and that marginal risk eventually stops just shy of the Texas-New Mexico border. So you have that. I didn't expect there would be an enhanced risk today for these areas, but apparently there is. All right, and then we have a tornado threat. We have a 5% hatched risk of tornadoes in Colorado, and then we have a 5% unhatched risk in Kansas, and then a 2% hatched risk spanning from Wyoming and Nebraska all the way down through Colorado and into Kansas and then the Kansas City limits and also extreme portions of western Missouri. And then we have another 2% risk. It extends from southern Illinois to extreme southwestern Indiana to western Kentucky and kind of terminates at the Missouri, Illinois, Kentucky triad almost. Yeah, I'm gonna be coughing a lot today and probably for the next couple days or something. But anyway, it's not gonna stop me. It may stop your ears from, listening, but you can always get hearing aids or something else. Anyway, so today, what do you call it? For the wind risk, we have a 30% SIG 2 or conditional intensity group 2, uh, which means that some very intense winds could potentially be going on today, with a 30% risk of those occurring. We also have a SIG 1 or conditional intensity group 1, that is the uh, black dashed area, the black area with the solid lines. Um, that is a conditional intensity group 2. Sorry, it keeps refreshing. The conditional intensity group 2 is the very bold black area with the solid lines. And then the conditional intensity group 1 is the, kind of not so bold with dashed lines. Both paint a conducive picture of severe winds in this context. But we also have a 30% risk extending from, the wind risk is perpetuating that enhanced risk just outside of Kansas City in the Kansas City limits. From Kansas to Nebraska, the SIG 1 is from the Kansas City area all the way through until Colorado. The SIG 2, or Conditional Intensity Group 2, is just contained in Kansas so far. And then there's a 15% risk that goes up from the Rockies down into western Missouri, and then there's a 5% risk that extends from the Minnesota, South Dakota, Iowa triad all the way down into the Oklahoma and Texas panhandles, and then there's another one that's quite segregated that's also in affecting Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, and Tennessee. So that's that for the wind. You could also see here's like the wind risk if you're not sure where your city lies, you could always, like, if you're in a big city with a big population, you could always look at the risk zones down here, and it'll tell you, oh, this percent, there's this amount of cities, there's also this amount of population, and this and this and this, and then it tells you like the same thing, but just for all of them. So yeah, that's that. And then the hail risk is a a SIG 2, conditional intensity group 2. There is a very big risk of hail. If hail does spawn, it could be very huge. And that's contained in Colorado. And then the SIG 1, or conditional intensity group 1, is located from Colorado into Wyoming and Nebraska all the way down into Kansas. And then the 15% is the yellow region, goes from the Rockies to central Kansas. And then the what do you call it? The 5% risk of hail extends from Minnesota to the Oklahoma, Texas panhandles. So that is awesome. And you see, I actually never saw this. You see, SIG 2, or Conditional Intensity Group 2 for hail, says no major population centers in the risk area. I never saw that before. That's something pretty new that I don't think I've really seen much before, because usually SIG 2s are pretty substantial. But yeah, anyways, I digress. So yeah, the 15% SIG 2 equates to an enhanced risk. And then a 30% SIG 1 equates to an enhanced risk, all that. So, anyways, summary. Severe thunderstorms potentially capable of large to giant hail and a couple of let's read that again. Severe thunderstorms potentially capable of large to giant hail and a couple of tornadoes are possible over the plains of eastern Colorado. Scattered to numerous severe thunderstorms are possible farther east over northern Kansas late this afternoon through the late evening. Severe gusts ranging from 60 to 100 miles per hour are possible, along with a risk of a couple of tornadoes. Yeah, it's not very good. Eastern Colorado into western Kansas and Nebraska. Damn, I be coughing like a mug. Sorry, just bear with me here. A belt of moderate southwesterly mid-level flow will be maintained over the central high plains to the downstream of a western United States upper trough. A surface low near Dodge City, Kansas, and moist easterly low-level flow to its north will contribute to upslope flow into eastern Colorado and the Colorado Front Range. Strong heating in 50s to lower 60s dew points and steep 700 to 500 millibar lapse rates will result in moderate to large buoyancy by mid-afternoon. Elongated hodographs will favor supercells with the more intense updrafts. Some increase in low-level hodographs towards the early evening, coupled with a moist boundary layer, may aid in the risk for supercell tornadoes, in addition to the risk for hail. So yeah, that's cool. Some of the latest model forecast soundings suggest giant hail of 3 to 4.5 inches in diameter, with the more intense supercells over eastern Colorado late this afternoon into the early evening. Severe wind gusts will also be possible, with the strongest thunderstorms with this activity diminishing by late evening. Kansas vicinity. A very moist surface was analyzed this morning across the central Great Plains, to the south of a front across central and northern Kansas, to the east of a triple point. Model guidance shows the lowest 100 millibar mean mixing ratios of 16 to 18 grams per kilogram later this afternoon. This very rich moisture, coupled with heating to the south of the front and early day outflow from thunderstorm activity over southwest Nebraska, will result in a very unstable air mass by late afternoon. Model guidance has trended towards a severe mesoscale convective system developing across northern Kansas and moving east-southeastward into the lower Missouri Valley by late evening. Although it does remain unclear exactly how this will evolve, confidence has increased with regards to a storm cluster and upscale growth occurring on the northern rim of very rich moisture and a modest southerly low-level jet. Some indication exists for a couple of supercells to develop ahead of the evolving cluster and the eventual squall line. Large hail and perhaps a risk of tornadoes could accompany this activity. We have increased severe wind probabilities and intensity levels, with the most intense phase of the squall line likely where the overlap of greater effective shear, or 30 to 35 knots, and the large buoyancy resides. A bow echo capable of a swath of 60 to 80 mile per hour wind gusts, with locally peaking gusts of 80 to 100 miles per hour, is forecast along with the possibility for a couple of mesovortices capable of these locally higher gusts and/or tornadoes. A gradual weakening is expected as this mesoscale convective system moves into western parts of Missouri late. Southern Kansas and northwest Oklahoma. A dryland will become established this afternoon from the eastern Texas panhandle into south-central Kansas. Hot conditions along and west of the dryland will help to initiate isolated thunderstorms. These high bay supercells could pose an occasional threat of hail and damaging winds for a few hours. Southern Illinois into western Kentucky. An upper trough continues to lift northeastward across the mid-Mississippi Valley today, with a moist and moderately unstable air mass present from southern Illinois southward. Mid-level lapse rates are marginal for severe thunderstorms, and winds aloft are modest. Nevertheless, veering winds with height and sufficient convective available potential energy will pose an occasional risk of strong storms capable of gusty winds and/or a tornado today. So that is for today's risk. So please just be aware if you live in eastern Colorado and if you live in Kansas and Nebraska. So this was today's risk, and now we have tomorrow's risk. Tomorrow's risk is much more substantial. It's going to kick off a multi-day threat of severe weather. So here we go. Also, the severe weather will be spanning from the United States to Canada, so it will be traversing the Canadian boundaries. Anyways, so the categorical outlook, sorry, I got ahead of myself. The categorical outlook states that there is an enhanced risk from the Dakotas to Minnesota. There is a slight risk also from the Dakotas and Minnesota down through Iowa into Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, and also extreme portions of southeastern Colorado. Then the marginal risk going into the Texas panhandles from Canada all the way down to the Oklahoma and Texas panhandles and northeastern New Mexico, with another marginal risk jettisoning from from the Canadian border, Canada, all the way down through the Midwest and the Ohio Valley and the Mississippi Valley. From Minnesota to Wisconsin to Iowa to Missouri to Illinois to Indiana to Kentucky and to Tennessee, that's where that marginal risk is. It's that other green line jettisoning towards Nashville. So if you know where Nashville, Tennessee is, then ta-da. This comes with a very large risk for tornadoes, and a large is the key here, because with this hatching, this means that supercells are capable of strong tornadoes tomorrow in North Dakota and South Dakota as well. There is a 10% risk of tornadoes extending from Canada all the way down to North Dakota, and then stops just before the South Dakota-North Dakota border. And then there is a 5% from Canada to the Dakotas and Minnesota, and then there's a 2% extending from the Canada to the Dakotas, Minnesota, Iowa, and Nebraska, and just breaching the Nebraska-Kansas border. The hatched risk also contains the Dakotas. That's for the tornado risk, so please be prepared if you live in North Dakota, like Fargo, Grand Forks, Minot, all those places. We also have a 45% hatched risk of wind. The hatched risk goes all the way from Canada all the way down into the Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico triad. We have a 45% risk of what do you call it? Winds from Canada to the Dakotas. We have a 30% risk of wind extending from the Dakotas and Minnesota up through Canada. A 15% risk extending from, the wind risk is perpetuating the slight risk because, the biggest risk is delineated, and then there's a bunch of other stuff. The 15% win risk actually correlates with the slight risk, and then the 5% win risk correlates with the two marginal risks jettisoning opposite of each other. Be right back. I'm back, everybody. So I am back. Awesome. So that win risk correlates with the slight and the marginal as well. And then we have a hail risk, a 30% risk of hail. So some potentially large to very large hail is possible, or not possible, but expected tomorrow. And the hatching goes from Canada to the Dakotas and into Nebraska. Clean, just a straight beeline for Kansas, but it doesn't quite make it there. The 30% risk just contains Canada and the Dakotas. The 15% risk contains Canada, the Dakotas, Minnesota, Nebraska, and Kansas. And the 5% region is 5% risk area is the brown zone from Montana and all that down into the northern plains, the Great Lakes area, the Midwest, and the central and southern plains. So there you go. So that's that for tomorrow. So tomorrow, again, if you live in the Dakotas, uh, especially central and eastern North Dakota, central and eastern and northeastern and northern South Dakota, or northwestern Minnesota, please, especially in those areas, be prepared. If you live in the orange, be prepared for a risk of tornadoes, large hail, and damaging winds tomorrow. If you live in the yellow, same thing, but it just won't be as intense. And if you live in the green, you should be okay. The most you're probably going to get is just some sporadic wind gusts and some potentially small hail, maybe a tornado, but no really guarantee. But you still should be vigilant and very aware, no matter what risk you're in. If you're in the light green, you should be fine, in my opinion. It's just a general garden variety, rain showers and thunderstorms, so I think you should be okay. But if you really want to, if you really want to stay up to date, you always can, and it's what makes this world a better place. You know what I mean? Anyways, so I looked through this, and there is a lot to read. So let's get through this. So summary: numerous severe thunderstorms are likely to develop across parts of the northern plains and the upper Mississippi Valley Tuesday afternoon into the night. Very large hail, tornadoes, a few of which could be strong, and damaging winds with significant gusts appear likely. Synopsis. A negatively tilted upper trough will be oriented from the Pacific Northwest to the southern Great Basin Tuesday morning. This feature will pivot east through the period, becoming positioned from southwest Saskatchewan to the central High Plains. A belt of enhanced southwesterly 500 millibar flow will overspread portions of the northern and central plains ahead of the aforementioned trough. Meanwhile, an intensifying low-level jet will develop during the evening and overnight hours across much of the plains toward the upper Midwest. At the surface, a low pressure over eastern Montana will gradually deepen and shift east-northeast across the northern plains and the adjacent Canadian prairies. A Pacific front and dryline feature will extend southward from the low across the western Dakotas and Nebraska. A secondary surface low may develop in the vicinity of eastern Colorado, western Kansas, and southwest Nebraska, where a dryline will extend from western Kansas southward into northwest Oklahoma and the Texas Panhandle. Further east, a quasi-warm front feature is expected to extend northwest to southeast from Minnesota to the mid-Mississippi Valley. This boundary may gradually lift northward through the evening and overnight in the response to the low to mid-level mass response and the increasing low-level jet. These boundaries will be a focus for severe thunderstorm development during the afternoon into the overnight hours. Northern Plains vicinity. Convection is expected to develop near the North Dakota-Montana border vicinity by mid to late afternoon along the surface boundary. A warm front should be well north of the Dakotas over the southern Canadian prairies, and increasing southerly low-level flow will transport low to mid-60s dew points northward into the region. Cooling aloft will result in steepening mid-level lapse rates atop very rich boundary layer moisture supporting mixed layer convective available potential energy increasing to 3 to 4,000 joules per kilogram, which is very high, but not unusual for June. South to southwesterly low-level winds will become southwesterly in the mid to upper levels, resulting in supercell wind profiles and 40-plus knots of effective shear magnitudes. Initial supercell storms are expected, though these storms may be somewhat higher based within the more modest boundary layer moisture across the western Dakotas far eastern Montana. Large hail and damaging winds are possible with these storms initially. As the convection develops eastward into the axis of greater low-level moisture and strong instability, severe potential will increase, particularly with respect to swaths of damaging winds and tornadoes. As the low-level jet increases during the evening and given mid to upper-level flow is oriented parallel to the surface boundary, upscale growth into one or more linear segments is expected. As cold pool consolidation occurs, potential for significant wind gusts greater than 65 knots is expected to increase across parts of central North Dakota. Low-level shear will also support tornado potential, whether semi-discrete supercells can be maintained or with mesovortex generation within linear bands. As such, we have left tornado probabilities similar to the prior forecast. Given the expectation that storm mode will become more linear with time, hail probabilities have been lowered and we removed the 45% risk area. Nevertheless, large to very large hail will be possible with any discrete supercells that can be maintained or are embedded within linear segments. Nebraska to South Dakota to mid-Missouri Valley vicinity. Convection emanating northeast from Nebraska from Nebraska may eventually grow upscale into a mesoscale convective system during the nighttime hours and spread into eastern South Dakota and the mid-Missouri Valley area. This scenario is uncertain, however, given the ample deep layer flow, the extreme instability, and at least subtle large-scale ascent over the region as the low-level jet overspreads this area overnight. This scenario becomes plausible. If this occurs, the damaging wind potential will be possible, and severe probabilities have been expanded across portions of the region. Kansas into the Oklahoma and Texas panhandles and northeast New Mexico. High-based convection is expected to develop along the surface dry line during the late afternoon. Deep boundary layer mixing will support steep low-level lapse rates. 500 millibar temperatures around negative 10 degrees Celsius also will support steep mid-level lapse rates near 8 to 8.5 degrees Celsius per kilometer per regional forecast soundings. Deep layer shear will not be as strong as further north, but strong instability and inverted V subcloud thermodynamic profiles will support severe wind gusts. There is some potential that if thunderstorms can be maintained further east towards better low-level moisture as the low-level jet increases during the evening, a swath of significant wind gusts could occur across the southwest Kansas vicinity. Severe probabilities have been increased across portions of the area given a very favorable environment and a strong signal within most forecast guidance. mid-Mississippi Valley into the lower Ohio Valley. A quasi-warm front and moisture boundary will overlap the region from northwest to southeast and is likely to lift northward towards Lake Michigan overnight. Large-scale ascent will remain weak until late in the period. Nevertheless, strong instability within a very moist and unstable air mass will support isolated severe wind gusts potential through peak heating within any storms that do develop. Additional storms may develop overnight from Wisconsin into northern Illinois as the low-level jet noses into the region, resulting in strong warm advection atop the surface boundary. While this activity will remain or may remain elevated above the nocturnal stable layer, some potential for strong gusts or marginal hail is possible. I'm going to be right back. Alright, I'm back. Sorry about that. I do apologize. Uh, so, the 7:30 UTC Day 3 severe thunderstorm outlook is actually about to be updated. So we are going to potentially wait on that. Actually, technically, I don't have to wait. I could just say the 7:30 UTC and then record the 19:30 UTC and say here's an update. So awesome. But anyways, so let's just go into this. So there is an enhanced risk of severe weather expected on Wednesday for Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois. My friend in Illinois is actually in this risk, so props to him. So awesome. Anyways, so the enhanced risk is, well, like I said, in where are my words trying to go? There's somewhere. Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois is where the enhanced risk is. And then the slight risk extends from Canada into Minnesota and then Wisconsin and then a most of the UP of Michigan and parts of the LP of Michigan going into Lake Michigan, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and all that stuff. Oh my god, I am so sorry. I did not mean to do that. Edit that out. So pretty awkward. Anyway, so and then there's a marginal risk that's in the green, the dark green, from the Dakotas down through into the plains, into the Midwest, into the Great Lakes, and yeah. So yeah, and then the probabilistic outlook is essentially the same thing as the categorical outlook, except the fact that there is a hatched risk of of severe weather extending from the kind of the Minnesota-Canada border all the way down through almost the whole state of Wisconsin, like 98% of it. Then going into Illinois and then also into Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri. That's what's happening. So anyway, so a little bit wordy, but not that bad. Okay, summary. Scattered to numerous severe thunderstorms capable of large to very large hail, tornadoes, and damaging winds with significant gusts appear likely across portions of the upper Mississippi Valley and Midwest Wednesday afternoon into the night. More sporadic occurrences of large hail and damaging winds are also possible into the Central Plains. Synopsis. The zero-Z models have trended towards a similarly timed but slightly more amplified shortwave trough, which will move through the northern plains into the upper Mississippi Valley, in tandem with a 50 to 60-plus knot jet streak. Meanwhile, a stronger upstream system is forecast to amplify across the northern and central plains late Wednesday night into Thursday morning. At the surface, a cold front initially from the eastern Dakotas into the central high plains will push east into the upper Great Lakes. A frontal wave is forecast to develop from eastern South Dakota into central Minnesota by the afternoon, where it may link with an outflow boundary extending into central Wisconsin. The trailing extension of the front is expected to stall across the the mid or lower Missouri Valley in response to the deepening of a surface low over the central or southern high plains. So, upper Midwest, upper Mississippi Valley into the upper Great Lakes and the mid to lower Missouri Valley. A very moist boundary layer, characterized by boundary layer dew points in the upper 60s to mid 70s, is forecast ahead of the front, which, coupled with steep lapse rates, will contribute to moderate to strong instability by the afternoon. Thunderstorms are expected to develop by early afternoon along the surface front and any outflow boundaries across the upper Mississippi Valley, with subsequent south-southwesterly storm development into Iowa and the lower Missouri Valley by mid to late afternoon. The strongest deep layer shear is forecast across the upper Mississippi Valley into the upper Midwest, with decreasing bulk shear magnitudes with southward extent being offset by stronger instability. The Cape shear parameter space will favor organized storm modes, including supercells and bowing structures. Large to very large hail will likely be the initial hazard, with the threat for damaging winds and tornadoes increasing as storms move into Wisconsin, eastern Iowa, and northwest Illinois, where stronger low-level shear is forecast. Additional isolated to widely scattered thunderstorms are anticipated by late afternoon into the evening across portions of the lower Missouri Valley into at least eastern Kansas. While the vertical shear will be somewhat marginal, the strong instability will support strong updrafts and downdrafts capable of isolated occurrences of large hail and damaging winds. A separate elevated thunderstorm regime may materialize Wednesday night into Thursday morning across portions of central and eastern Nebraska and northern Kansas as low-level warm advection increases ahead of the next mid-level trough, moving into the northern and central plains. The strongest storms will be capable of a large hail threat. So that's that. The Storm Prediction Center hasn't updated this yet, so we will come back to that. Anyway, day 4. Day 4 is a continuation of what will happen on Wednesday. It will happen on Thursday. So, day 4 is Thursday. Day 3 is Wednesday. Day 2 is Monday. And today, day 1 is, day 2 is Tuesday. Day 1 is Monday. Day 3 is Wednesday. And day 4 is Thursday. Yeah. Yeah. Anyways. So this is the day 4 outlook. So the day 4 outlook has a 15% risk of severe weather, But we're starting off with the 15% just because it's more grand and I'm looking at it. A 15% risk of severe weather extending from the entirety of the lower peninsula of Michigan, all the way down into Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, parts of Kansas and Oklahoma, Arkansas, and then Indiana and Illinois and all that stuff, and even Northwest Ohio. There it is, the day 3 marginal risk. So we're going to actually go back to the day 3 marginal risk, cover that, then we'll end the video. So, day 4 risk of severe weather, and then I did the 15% first. The 30% extends from southern Lake Michigan. Speaking of Lake Michigan, the 15% risk covers the entirety of Lake Michigan. 30% risk covers the southern portion of Lake Michigan into extreme southwestern Michigan, southern Wisconsin, central and northern and western Illinois, eastern Iowa, central and northeast Missouri, and northwest Indiana. It does include Chicago, the Quad Cities, and St. Louis. Actually, St. Louis is in the 15%, but it's close. It's close. But anyways, so day 5, there's nothing. Day 6, there's nothing. So is day 7 and day 8. There's nothing after day 4. Let's read the description, though, shall we? Day 4, Thursday. An active period of severe weather is expected from the upper Great Lakes into the Ozarks Plateau, with the most concentrated and potentially most significant severe thunderstorms affecting parts of the Midwest. Within the base of an upper low centered over Manitoba and northwest Ontario, the models are in good agreement in depicting the progression of a potent shortwave trough and attendant mid to upper level jet streaks through the upper Midwest and the upper Great Lakes. There is some model signals that a trailing perturbation on the immediate cyclonic side of the mid-level jet will overspread the mid-Mississippi Valley Thursday night. At the surface, a deepening surface low and frontal wave is expected to develop from central Iowa into the southern UP of Michigan during the day, along a cold front advancing through the upper Midwest and into the upper Great Lakes. The southwest extension of that boundary will progress southeast through the lower Missouri and mid-Mississippi valleys, while becoming quasi-stationary across the southern plains. The specific boundary location across the Midwest may be modified to some extent from a thunderstorm complex moving through the area Wednesday night and early Thursday. A very moist air mass is expected to reside to the south of the surface front, which coupled with modest steep mid-level lapse rates, is expected to yield moderate to strong instability. The presence of a 50 to 70 knot mid-level jet streak attendant the shortwave trough will result in relatively strong deep layer shear along the frontal zone, with vector orientation becoming increasingly parallel to the boundary with southward extent. The overall pattern appears supportive of an organized severe weather episode from the upper Great Lakes into the mid-Mississippi Valley. There is some model signals that a corridor of enhanced tornado potential could develop along and south of the surface low track from eastern Iowa and northern Illinois into central and southern Wisconsin. And that potential scenario will be dictated by the location of the effective surface boundary. And additional, more isolated severe storms appear possible across parts of the Northeast. Friday, day 5. A number of the zero-Z models progress a lower latitude shortwave trough through the upper Ohio Valley and the lower Great Lakes, which is a departure from previous model runs. That scenario would increase severe weather potential across those areas into New England and perhaps the mid-Atlantic, given the potential for a moderately unstable air mass across the prefrontal warm sector. Should subsequent models remain consistent with this recent trend, an unconditional 15% probability contour may be needed in the next forecast update. Elsewhere, isolated severe storms appear possible across portions of the southern high plains. Day 6, Saturday. The ensemble mean solutions are in good agreement in depicting a mid to upper level low over the Hudson Bay with a belt of strong mid-level flow extending from slight troughing over the northern high plains into the Great Lakes and the Northeast. There is more spread across the deterministic models with respect to the longitudinal position of that trough and the position of the associated frontal system. In general, it does appear that some severe weather threats could materialize across the central plains. However, the confidence in that scenario is low. Days 7 and 8, Sunday and Monday. The ensembles indicate a gradual amplification of the large-scale pattern featuring troughing from the Hudson Bay into the Mississippi Valley and the upstream ridging across western Canada and the Pacific Northwest. The location of any relevant surface frontal systems remain highly uncertain, as does the location or locations of any severe weather threat. So, like I said earlier, we are going to go back to day 3, the day 3 area, and recap that. So this is the new 1930 UTC day 3 severe thunderstorm outlook. It is a huge difference. It has been expanded by a lot. My friend is still in the risk zone. So now this thing extends from almost the entirety of Wisconsin into vast portions of eastern Minnesota, into eastern and central-ish and northeastern Iowa, into northwest Illinois, with the slight risk extending from the Canada to Minnesota, the Great Lakes region, into the Midwest and the plains, stopping at the Kansas-Oklahoma border, and then the marginal risk extends from Canada and then goes through the Great Lakes and Michigan as well, and also the Dakotas into the Midwest portions and into the plains, stopping at the Texas Panhandle. With a probabilistic outlook kind of looking like the same in terms of hatching. The hatching covers all of Wisconsin, most of eastern and central Minnesota. I should say all of eastern and central Minnesota, also southern and northern Minnesota also. And then most of Iowa, except for northwestern portions, northwest Illinois, northern Missouri, northeast Kansas, southeast Nebraska, and stuff like that. So, it's definitely going to be different. So let's read this again. So, summary. Scattered to numerous severe thunderstorms capable of large to very large hail, tornadoes, and damaging winds with significant gusts appear likely across portions of the upper Mississippi Valley and the Midwest Wednesday afternoon into the night. More sporadic occurrences of large hail and damaging winds are possible into the Central Plains. Synopsis. An upper low is forecast over southern Alberta and Saskatchewan and northern Montana Wednesday morning. One upper shortwave trough associated with this system will be oriented over the northern high plains Wednesday morning and will spread eastward through the period into the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes vicinity, with a second upper shortwave trough deepening and developing southeast from the northern Rockies to the central high plains by Thursday morning. At the surface, a cold front will initially be located from eastern North Dakota towards the central high plains. The northern portion of this front will develop east across the upper Midwest, while the southwestern extension of the front stalls from the mid-Missouri Valley into the southern high plains as a surface low develops over Nebraska and Kansas overnight. Alrighty, so upper Mississippi Valley and Great Lakes towards the mid to lower Missouri Valley vicinity. Remnant convection from the day 2 or Tuesday period may be ongoing or decaying across parts of the region Wednesday morning. Furthermore, convective outflow could be positioned somewhere across the upper Midwest. As a result, the evolution of convection from the day 2 period will likely have some impact on where corridors of greater severe potential develop on Wednesday. Regardless, rich boundary layer moisture will spread across parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Illinois as a warm front retreats northward across the Great Lakes and ahead of the advancing surface cold front. This will foster strong destabilization across the region as vertical shear increases with time. Numerous organized severe storms, possibly both supercells and Boeing segments, are expected with an accompanying all-hazard severe risk, particularly across parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin and possibly Iowa into northern Illinois. With southwest extent into the mid to lower Missouri Valley, effective shear magnitudes will decrease. However, a very moist and strongly unstable air mass will still be in place ahead of the stalled surface boundary across Kansas to western Iowa. A dry line will also extend into the southern high plains, though the boundary layer moisture will also become more modest with southwest extent. Both of these boundaries will serve as a focus for a secondary area of severe thunderstorm potential during the late afternoon and evening, with both large hail and damaging gusts possible. Additional severe thunderstorms may develop overnight as a low-level jet strengthens and overspreads the stalled surface boundary across Kansas. Large hail could accompany this activity later in the forecast period. Alright, so that is it. Days 1 through 8. That's what we covered. So, awesome sauce. There is going to definitely be severe weather, without a doubt. Please, for the love of all that is holy, pay attention to any risk today. If you live in Kansas, Nebraska, or Colorado today, be sure to pay attention. If you live in the Dakotas and Minnesota tomorrow, if tomorrow you somehow live or stumble upon the Dakotas and Minnesota, there will be severe weather with strong tornadoes, very large hail, and very damaging winds expected. That's on Tuesday. That's the most amplified risk. If you live in Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, and Minnesota on Wednesday, there is a risk of severe weather that we just covered in the orange. And if you live in Chicago or anywhere in Illinois, southern Wisconsin, eastern Iowa, most of Missouri, central and northern Indiana, and all of the lower portion of Michigan, be prepared for severe weather. Also, if you live in the mid-Atlantic or northeastern regions, please be aware that severe weather is possible on Friday of this week. There are still some details that we need to, you know, foresee upon and look over. So, uncertainty will cause, you know, severe weather parameters and all this to go back and forth and back and forth. But don't be discouraged. Even though there may be a severe weather signal, still be prepared immediately and always watch over the forecast. Anyways, that's it for today. And yeah, so have a great one.